Your mom played basketball with your head as a baby. Unfortunately, apparently Uncle Sam has an outerversal jab. I'm gonna go over why literally if he farts, Naruto dies. If he farts, Saiyan Saga dies for sure. What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Jobbers and Goons, and I'm gonna be honest. I'm in a Star Wars mood. This is I have a small Star Wars server that I try to be active in. Sometimes it's hard, but we had a pretty hearty discussion on this topic before, which was Team Kenobi, aka Attack of the Clones, Kenobi and Skywalker, right up to their first encounter with Dooku. Could that Team Kenobi beat Team Jinn, which is Qui Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, up until they fought Maul? Who would win if these two legendary duos were to clash in the Star Wars verse? Obviously, we're acting like they don't know each other. So, like, for example, if younger Kenobi fights older Kenobi, they won't have some weird meltdown about parallels. They'll just engage in combat. Who would win if these two clash? We're going to break down both sides and then go over who I think wins. Make sure to smash the like button if you want to see more Star Wars content. Let's get this to 150 likes. Give me a reason to make more Star Wars content. You guys know I love Star Wars. You just have to show some love and support. But anyways, guys, thank you so much. Without further ado, let's get into the battle. So first side we're going to break down is the one that canonically comes first. This will be Team Jinn. Qui-Gon Jinn is the leader of this duo. He is nicknamed the Maverick among the Jedi, and is a longtime Jedi Master held in high regard within the Order. Now, due to his rather radical beliefs and trust in things like the Living Force, he was never officially put on the Jedi Council, as obviously these extremist views were kind of outside of the norm for the Jedi Code, and some ideas he had wavered on pro-Jedi or anti-Jedi code. This made Qui-Gon one of the more interesting characters in lore, and incredibly impactful. In fact, he's the one that discovered Anakin Skywalker, aka the Chosen One. Unfortunately, upon this Tatooine visit and the discovery of the Chosen One, he ran into a young Sith Lord named Darth Maul. Encountered him twice, nearly killing him the first time they fought, according to the files and journals of Darth Maul. Now, upon their second encounter, Qui-Gon Jinn was unfortunately slain due to the fact that Maul had plenty of time to prepare, was familiar with Qui-Gon's style at this point, and now had respect for it as he found him incredibly dangerous, and kind of played the long game in the battle, waiting for Qui-Gon to get tired and eventually taking him down. Qui-Gon Jinn overall is one of the most celebrated Jedi Masters ever for good reasons. He trained under Count Dooku, one of the greatest to ever live and to ever pick up a lightsaber. He went on some of the most missions ever for a Jedi, despite being human, and humans don't live as long as others. And overall, the Maverick is one of the GOATs in Star Wars. Now, in terms of what he brings to the table in battle, in terms of physicality, Qui-Gon Jinn, even around this time, was one of the physically strongest Jedi. He was a large, huge human male, and would use his size, strength, and amplification through the Force to ragdoll people. This would include his strikes, literally like having Darth Maul shook. He was hitting Darth Maul so hard that Darth Maul thought back to when he was like dueling Sidious. That's how hard Jinn hits. In terms of speed, he can keep up with the likes of Darth Maul. In fact, in their first encounter, he nearly killed him and got the better of him when they fought in the desert. And then later he would, of course, lose to him. But his speed is of important note, and his style, Ataru, is speed-based, so obviously in his prime he is a lot faster. He then kind of resorted to a more grounded approach in combat. His biggest question mark is his tank. Like, Qui-Gon Jinn is not a tanky character at all in terms of his gas tank. He wears out pretty fast. That's how Maul was able to take him down. Now, despite the question marks surrounding his endurance, Qui-Gon is quite tough, obviously able to shrug off blows from Maul and go toe-to-toe with him, as well as fight several bandits throughout his time and other warlords as a Jedi. And he earned the nickname Maverick for a reason. He's tough as shit. And while his, yes, gas tank's not the best, he makes up for it in other areas, and in my opinion is pretty slept on for being quick. In terms of what he brings to the table as a duelist, Qui-Gon Jinn's one of the more celebrated duelists in the Jedi Order's history. He's actually considered to be one of the top tiers to ever serve. This is according to those that saw him practice within the temple and duel other Jedi. His form, Ataru, made most famous by Yoda, is a speed-based form. However, in his older age, Qui-Gon resorted to a much more grounded base approach. This allowed him to utilize his size and strength, as well as experience with the blade, to gain leverage against opponents and catch them off guard, as well as power through their defenses. He hit hard and fast, but it wasn't typical Ataru. He also trained under the legendary Blade Master Count Dooku, who has recorded sparring wins over the likes of Mace Windu, and is stated to simply be one of the greatest duelists to ever exist in the galaxy. So, as a duelist, in terms of credentials before even fighting any major Sith, Qui-Gon Jinn was one of the best. He then proceeded to have an encounter with Darth Maul that, in my opinion, really solidified how great he was with the blade. In this encounter, Darth Maul said in the desert in his journal that he was taken by surprise by the skill and physical dominance by this Jedi. Also, Qui-Gon was completely unfazed by what Maul was doing. Like, he was unbothered by fighting the Sith Lord in a duel. And Maul said he had never had a duel like this since his battle with Sidious, and actually compared the duel in a lot of ways to his encounter with Darth Sidious. Comparing in any way as a duelist to Sidious is pretty crazy, and just shows how high of respect Maul had for Jinn's capability. Now, of course, in their second duel, I think it's important to note that Maul switched his style for this. He had that much respect for Qui-Gon as a duelist that he had to completely change his approach in the fight and lure him into wearing out. So making someone like Maul switch their style up in battle and like have to fight a completely different way, basically fight passive until they can finally wear you out, pretty impressive if you ask me. Overall, as a duelist, I think Qui-Gon's a menace. Now, in terms of the Force, it gets weird. Qui-Gon Jinn's case is weird in terms of Force capabilities. Yes, he became a Force ghost, something extremely rare and you have to be incredibly powerful for. However, his strength in the Force was not so much militant in nature as so like natural and passive, and dare I say almost peaceful. He had exceptionally good awareness, pregog, connection to the Force, able to see the future and whatnot. But his actual combative abilities, yes, he demonstrated some Force push, some telepathy, and things of that, but nothing too crazy. Overall, yes, he's incredibly powerful, but he doesn't showcase that much craziness in terms of his arsenal in the Force. However, I think it's important to note that characters like Maul didn't attempt to use the Force on him when we see Maul use the Force all the time on Kenobi. So even he didn't seem that confident he could, so that might count for something. But overall, nothing too crazy in terms of the Force for Qui-Gon. Moving on, let's discuss his teammate, the likes of Padawan Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now, Obi-Wan coming up in the Jedi, as a Jedi, he was not seen as a particularly great talent. Like, he was nothing to brag about. However, there was some potential seen in him by Master Qui-Gon, and he decided to take the apprentice under his helm. What he got and what he ended up helping raise was a Padawan that's extremely resilient. Qui-Gon raised Kenobi to be ready for whatever. Like, yes, the Jedi code is peace, but if you gotta scrap, you scrap hard. And this showed in a lot of the adventures Kenobi went on with Qui-Gon. This includes the likes of taking on former Jedi like Xanatos, a fallen former apprentice, to the likes of Qui-Gon. And it was stated in that battle that essentially this young Kenobi was not too far behind in terms of speed to the likes of Qui-Gon. Eventually, there was a fateful battle in which him and his master Qui-Gon Jinn confronted the Sith Lord, first one seen in ages, Darth Maul. And in this battle, his master Qui-Gon was slain, and in a fit of rage, Kenobi would go on to duel Maul, and Maul would get the advantage on him, nearly killing him. But he bragged too long, allowed Kenobi to recover, get his lightsaber with the Force, and cut him in half. That is the story of young Kenobi up to that point. Now, physically, what did he bring to the table? I already spoke on his speed. He was almost as fast as Qui-Gon at that point, according to multiple stories of them battling. And when he was rage amped, he seemed to be just as fast, if not faster, than Qui-Gon was in dueling with Darth Maul. So that's definitely important to note. His strength is not nearly on the level of Qui-Gon, however. His master is known more for slugging it out and overempowering people, whereas this young Kenobi was quick. He definitely is not strength-based at all. Strength is pretty good, can destroy bots and throw around large aliens, but nothing too crazy. There's definitely a notable strength difference between him and Qui-Gon. In terms of gas tank, he has a better gas tank than Qui-Gon. This is pre-prime Kenobi, however, he is pretty seasoned, and he does train very hard, and it's allowed him to develop a very good gas tank, easily able to sustain in duels against Maul, constantly press Xanatos, battle entire battalions and droids, no problem without wearing out. He has a pretty good gas tank. And toughness, Kenobi's always been tough. Even when he's hanging off the edge, about to die, he's tough and resilient enough to come up with a plan to counteract this fate. Even though he's not one of the most impressive physical beings at that point, pre-prime, Kenobi, aka Padawan Kenobi, was still incredibly tough and fast as a Padawan. Now, moving on to his dueling. Kenobi obviously trained at the Jedi Academy, as most do. Trained under several esteemed Jedi, but was not seen as a particularly good duelist until he got much older. Under the tutelage of Qui-Gon Jinn, obviously, first style he learned was Form 1, which is very basic, but then he would move on to take up the style his master Qui-Gon Jinn uses, which is Ataru. However, given the physical difference between him and Qui-Gon, with Kenobi being a more elusive, agility-based fighter, he used a much more acrobatic sense of Ataru, a more common practice of Ataru, instead of the unconventional form his master uses. And he is a talented enough duelist to go toe-to-toe with the likes of Xanatos. It was stated in that novel that Kenobi would soon reach the level of Qui-Gon as a duelist. And his duel with Maul was noteworthy. He was able to cut his blade in half, land a strike on him. However, Maul did get the better of him in that exchange and was clearly better than him. However, in terms of dueling, this Padawan Kenobi is nothing to laugh at, especially when he's pissed off. He can go toe-to-toe with experienced duelists like Maul for quite some time. Now let's look at the Force use of this Padawan Kenobi. Now, Kenobi, despite being obviously much to the junior of Qui-Gon Jinn at this point, in my opinion, had a little more showing and versatility with the Force. This was a Kenobi who doesn't have quite the sage-like approach to the Force as his master. However, he does have a deep reverence and respect for the Force due to Qui-Gon and his teachings that allows him to really harness the Force in unique ways. And in my opinion, young Kenobi showed more of a nuanced approach to battle with the Force, much more showcases of telepathic pushes and crushes and throwing beings around, as well as using the Force in a much more aggressive nature. He's not like the craziest at this point in terms of spamming Force abilities and whatnot, but he is more viable, in my opinion, than Qui-Gon to use the Force in a more offensive way. However, it is important to note that where Qui-Gon was never really challenged in terms of defending himself with the Force, Maul had no problem doing that to Kenobi and kind of tossed him around. So his Force defenses are nothing to really brag about at this point. Overall, Padawan Kenobi, in my opinion, is pretty slept on in terms of what he brings to the table, and is very dangerous in a fight, especially when he's teaming up with his master, Qui Gon Jinn. However, are these two enough for Team Kenobi? Let's review the other side of things. This Team Kenobi we are reviewing comes from right up to their first encounter with Dooku, in which he infamously beat their asses, right? So, what's this team capable of? Let's break down both. First, we'll go with the team leader, Jedi Knight Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now, Kenobi at this point already has the respect of pretty much everybody within the Order. This is mainly due to him as a Padawan taking down a Sith Lord. Now, quickly, he took Anakin under his tutelage, thanks to the dying wish of his master, Qui Gon Jinn, in hopes to raise Anakin to be an amazing Jedi and the hope of the galaxy. Up to this point, Kenobi has mostly fought against like other warlords and things of that nature. Not really other Sith to this point. It's after he really like confronts Dooku that we see him get into several brawls. But at this point, he's grown a lot in terms of his ability as a Jedi, and already is sent out on top secret missions for the Order due to his capabilities. Unfortunately, in his duel with Dooku, he did get mauled, and the start of the Clone Wars was a rough one for the kid. Now, in terms of his physicality, Kenobi has gotten a lot more physically gifted since his time of Qui-Gon passing, leading up to the Clone Wars. He is tough enough to endure torture like it's absolutely nothing. He's gotten a little bit faster. He's definitely physically matured in terms of what he can take and what he can dish out in strength, easily being able to ragdoll aliens and other warlords and such, even battling Wookiees. He also went toe-to-toe with the likes of Jango Fett and held his own in a brawl, even able to rock the Mandalorian himself. His physical profile is a lot more dangerous than it was as a Padawan, and it's definitely something that should be noted. Now, in terms of his abilities as a duelist, Kenobi has matured with the blade to some degree. He obviously still mainly focuses on Ataru, and up to this point, it's important to note, he did not yet stylistically switch over to Surisu. There is some dabblings, but ultimately getting washed is what led to a serious commitment to Surisu. While he does dabble, he doesn't really use it that much here. This is obviously emphasized and reinforced by the time they run it back in Revenge of the Sith. Dooku notes that at this point, Kenobi had switched from Ataru to Surisu and had become basically a perfect master of it. So this version we're analyzing here is a much more aggressive duelist. Using Ataru, he does take a more aggressive manner. He pushed the fight with Jango Fett, even using martial arts to try to get an advantage. He also pressed the fight with Dooku despite Anakin going down early. But he does show some measure of carefulness in dueling. Like, he didn't just bum rush Dooku like Anakin did. He went in and made sure he kept his distance and tried to figure out how to best approach Dooku in their combat. So he's definitely a lot wiser as a combatant here. He doesn't just blindly rush in like he used to as a Padawan, and as a result, he's a lot more mature as a duelist. Now, in terms of how much more capable he is with the Force, obviously he's used the Force on other aliens at this point, other fighters. He's even attempted it on characters like Jango, of course. He's a lot more mature in the Force, as he was forced to really grow as a man and teacher in order to properly instruct Anakin, because obviously Kenobi got kind of thrust into this role via the death of his master. This wasn't supposed to be his role. So he has to kind of embrace this and utilize all he knows as a Jedi to really teach Anakin the best he could. Like, that's the chosen one. You can't really fuck up as the leader, the chosen one. You know what I mean? There's a lot of pressure on his back. And the way he handled that was by just increasing his ability on the skill front as well as maturing in the Force. He's a lot more dangerous with his telekinesis, telepathy, and he's a lot more gifted in defense. For example, he deflected lightning with his blade in the Force from Dooku. This same lightning casually knocked out Anakin and threw him around like a rag doll. So he's definitely a lot more mature as a fighter and a Jedi Knight now compared to when he was a Padawan. Moving on, we have Kenobi's Padawan, Anakin Skywalker. This Anakin Skywalker is brash and known for being very impulsive. Like, Anakin's gonna fucking run in and swing. That's kind of his thing, right? That's what he does. So you shouldn't be shocked if you see Anakin try to bum rush. This is mostly due to his belief in his capabilities. He started off a child slave on Tatooine, was taken away by a Jedi Master after being told he's the chosen one. He was always a gifted pilot, and we find out this is due, obviously, to the Force. And he is taken at late stages, given he was like 9 or 10, to the Jedi Temple when most kids are taken there as toddlers. He was ridiculed and kind of isolated as a youth, kind of said to be like, oh, this kid's too old to become anything valuable to the Jedi. And as a result, he kind of used this to fuel his fire, and he would rapidly become one of the best prospects / Padawans the Jedi Council's ever seen. However, this led to a lot of conceit on his end. He kind of knows he's basically the Messiah, and this kind of gives him a huge ego. At one point, he says he's like stronger than Mace, as wise as Kenobi, shit like that. Like, he feels like he's stronger than Yoda and everybody there, so they can't judge him. They can't tell him what to do. He also has an inflated opinion of Kenobi, the guy teaching him, which is most likely due to the fact that Skywalker thinks he's the best. This kind of leads to several crazy events. However, he's incredibly gifted as a Padawan. Like, the hype is legit. He took down an entire Tusken Raider village by himself when raging when he found his mom dead. And he gave Dooku a pretty damn good battle after getting knocked out briefly by Dooku's lightning, eventually losing his arm and losing the battle. Now, in terms of physicality, by far, Anakin's one of the most gifted Padawans we've ever seen in terms of what they can physically do. One could argue he was faster already than Kenobi. I mean, he was pressuring Dooku a lot better and a lot more effectively, and just seemed to be more of a speed option against Dooku than Kenobi was. He's very agile as well, incredibly tough. I mean, literally from day one, he grew up in harsh conditions. So in terms of enduring, he's one of the tougher characters. However, what usually costs him is IQ and just being impulsive. It's never really his physicality. In terms of physicality, he's already one of the more athletic Jedi, and would only get much more athletic after that. But even up to that point, he's as athletic as most Jedi Knights. Now, in terms of his dueling, Anakin Skywalker at this point is an absolute prodigy with the blade. Pretty much anyone who saw Skywalker demonstrate his skill with a blade at this point called him a prodigy. Dooku himself admitted it during their final engagement in that duel before Dooku disarmed him. Kenobi himself, this is how much trust Kenobi had. He threw his lightsaber to Anakin, and he was pretty confident like Anakin could go toe-to-toe. He's that much of a freak with the blade. However, he's not as good as he thinks he is yet. Like, at that point, he thought he would one-shot Maul and stuff like that. He has an overinflated ego when it comes to his dueling. However, you can understand why. He's pretty damn talented. His preference of style and combat did align more so with Ataru, and given we know at this time how athletic Anakin was, it made perfect sense why he would kind of emulate Kenobi's acrobatic, aggressive style. However, I do truly feel that at this point, Anakin, his style was more dangerous because he was a lot more aggressive in application, and in my opinion, that's why he did a lot better in his second go-around with Dooku in that same fight. He's just a more adaptable fighter with his style and allows himself to kind of flow. giving way to his natural talent as a blade master. Now, overall, while still young, Anakin is nothing to be joked about when it comes to dueling ability at this stage, and he's quite dangerous. Now, finally, for Force abilities, obviously, Anakin has the chosen one moniker. That is, he's supposed to be the greatest to ever rise in the light side of the Force. Well, with that, obviously, comes with latent power stated to be beyond even the potential of the likes of Yoda. This potential, at this point, doesn't manifest in that crazy of a way. However, he is a lot more aggressive in the Force than most are, especially Jedi. It is well known that Anakin, at this point, was privy to Force pushes, pulls, telepathy, telekinesis, as well as potential Force crushes. He is liable to use the Force at an extreme rate, access Force rage, and he even has Force screams, which he shows a little later, but I do feel like if he had to, he probably could naturally muster one up. That's kind of what he did the first time. So overall, his Force abilities and applications are very aggressive in nature, and while he might not have better Force attacks right now than Kenobi, he is much more aggressive in the application, so it's much more likely he would use it. So, if these two teams were to clash, right? If Team Jinn and Team Kenobi were to collide, who do I think would win? Well, let's kind of break down how I see both sides. In terms of which team has the more physically gifted team, I'm going to have to lean Team Kenobi. Their gas tanks just way... Like, Qui-Gon has the clear physical limiter here with his endurance. So to me, given that Kenobi's much more athletic than his Padawan version, he got a lot more smoother and fluid in motion, as well as Anakin as a Padawan was more athletically gifted than Kenobi. I don't really see... Kenobi as a Padawan, of course. I don't really see there being a real argument for Team Jinn having the physical advantage. In terms of dueling, this is very tricky. I believe the best duelist here is Qui-Gon Jinn. But I believe Anakin was a better duelist than Padawan Kenobi. I don't believe Kenobi was better than Qui-Gon Jinn at that stage when he fought Dooku, and I'll kind of explain why in a minute. But I think this is kind of a draw, given both teams have their advantages in terms of duelists. But overall, the best duelist belongs to Jinn, so I might go with him on that. Now, for Force abilities, I would probably slightly lean Team Kenobi. Both teams don't have the craziest arsenal, but in terms of which side is most likely to use it, by far it's Team Kenobi. I'd probably lean Team Kenobi in that fashion. Now, you hear this breakdown, you probably initially think, oh, Team Kenobi probably clears. It's a complicated matchup. Styles make fights within the Star Wars universe, and in my opinion, this is no exception. So here's the thing, we got to consider a couple things. Why did I say Qui-Gon is the best duelist? Dooku, upon dueling both Kenobi and Skywalker, he wasn't impressed by either of them. He did think Anakin had potential. But when he fought Kenobi, he straight up said, yo, you were trained by Jinn, you are not Qui-Gon Jinn as a duelist. Like, you're just not there. So I don't see them being Qui-Gon level. I do think Qui-Gon's overall the most talented combatant here. Another big factor to this battle is how the teams work. Team Jinn, it's obvious Qui-Gon Jinn has the absolute respect from Kenobi. Kenobi does what Jinn says. Like, if Jinn says, Kenobi, wait here, I'll engage him by myself, Kenobi will go for that to see what his master has in mind. He has complete trust in the authority of Qui-Gon Jinn, whereas Anakin has this almost like God complex where he thinks whatever he's doing is the move, and he will outright ignore Kenobi to try to get his licks in. He did that against Dooku and dreadfully paid for it. Unfortunately, just simply running down on Qui-Gon Jinn like that for Anakin would be bad news here, as Qui-Gon doesn't really get shook, doesn't get thrown off his guard. Like, for example, when Maul tried to rush in and just bum rush Qui-Gon, he almost died. Like, he straight up admitted, like, yo, I wasn't prepared for the sauce. Qui-Gon is a fucking monster. And then after that, seeing how Anakin can kind of get blindsided, trying to bum rush in, I feel like this kind of strategy and approach to the battle is very dangerous against a Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon could easily rock his shit perhaps even damage him with the blade if he tries to bum rush like that. This would lead to an engagement in which Anakin's already kind of rocked, and Kenobi comes on in. Kenobi and Qui-Gon would engage. This is an interesting battle, however. I feel like Qui-Gon would approach this accordingly, not really playing around with Kenobi, whereas Dooku was. And they're not too far off, where Jinn, in my opinion, doesn't have that much room to play with his food. Fighting Kenobi, I do feel like his power-based Ataru would whittle down the defenses of Kenobi. Kenobi's not yet as good of a defensive fighter nearly as he will be, and I feel like Qui-Gon can take that 1v1. Can Padawan Kenobi hold off Anakin? I absolutely believe so, especially if Anakin makes a mistake early and gets hit by either Qui-Gon or Kenobi. Kenobi, while he's not nearly as talented as his counterpart, his resolve, drive, and quick wit is top-notch, and he would be able to survive against Anakin in this encounter. However, I would be lying if I said I think he overall would win that 1v1. If this was to draw out with just them in a 1v1, I think Anakin would eventually take down Kenobi. She's just better. But Qui-Gon, I believe, would either get Kenobi out the picture or take him down before that fight concludes. It would help jump Anakin. At the end of the day, I trust the experience and skill of Qui-Gon Jinn, Team Jinn, as well as the way they work together as a team and the absolute trust there. I believe that would give them the edge over Team Kenobi, who at this point are just simply too young to properly put down both Qui-Gon and young Kenobi, and Jedi Knight Kenobi as a leader just isn't what Qui-Gon is yet. Not at that point anyways. But anyways, guys, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Which side do you see winning? I think this is a very interesting battle. Let me know in the comment section down below who you think wins. But anyways, it's been your boy Jobbers and Goons. Smash the like button if you want Star Wars content to be more normal and frequent on the channel. And I'll see y'all later. Peace.